Following her resignation from Vector, Shion teams up with Scientia to investigate the company's secrets, while Alan takes her place looking after KOS-MOS. Meanwhile, Canaan, Jin, Jr., KOS, MOMO, and Ziggy investigate a landmass floating through space that originated from lost Jerusalem. Margulis attacks them in response, and the landmass is swallowed up in an inverted pocket of hyperspace, which the Elsa also falls into. Meanwhile, Shion visits Alan and sees a demonstration of two new weapons for fighting the Gnosis: T-elos, a battle robot meant to replace KOS-MOS, and Omega, a mech created from the remains of the Proto Omega and piloted by Abel. After the test, T-elos creator Roth Mantel informs Alan that KOS-MOS will be scrapped in favor of T-elos. Because KOS-MOS's weaponry is the only way to break into the hyperspace pocket and save the Elsa, Shion leads the group into the facility and rescues KOS-MOS, guided at one point by Abel. Nephilim visits Shion frequently during this time, and Shion begins to experience a series of blackouts where Udu contacts her. These events are observed by Wilhelm, who is working with the Testaments to find Abel and his Ark. Entering the hyperspace pocket, the group finds the Elsa and investigates the area, encountering both Albedo and Virgil, and learning that the Vessels of Anima, powering their ES mechs, are critical to the Testament's plans. They are then confronted by Mantel, who reveals himself as the Red Testament. T-elos nearly kills KOS-MOS, but Shion's pendant activates and seemingly transports the group to the planet Milsha 15 years in the past. I am very excited to jump into the material we have for today. There is a lot of good symbolism here at the beginning, as is generally the case in the intros of these games. Yeah. And it's just a very, very strong, I think, opening act. The strongest of the three by far, in my opinion.
Yeah, me too. I agree.
But before we do that, we have this comment from Kare-chan on YouTube, who has played the DS version and was giving some small corrections to what was said at the end of the Xenosaga II podcast series about the DS version. I hope somehow you will read this, because it's been 2 weeks since you uploaded that part of the podcast, and I wanted to clarify some important parts of Xenosaga DS. So the Sakura scenes, first her death, while you're in the dive into the Acephalon on the beach, Udu tries to connect with Albedo for the first time. So when Albedo's a child, right before the big event where they're all in a circle. Before that,
the seance.
That's right.
The summoning.
He's about to get hit by Udu's wave, and Sakura shields him. So Sakura gets in front of that wave from Udu and stops it from hitting Albedo. Albedo is angry and doesn't understand why she did that. She answers that she did it for Rubido's sake, because it would have taken Albedo away. It would have, know. So she for Rubido's sake, who she likes. Yeah. She was trying to protect Albedo.
She was trying to protect Rubido's second heart.
That's right.
Was it, right? Which is Albedo's connection to Rubido.
So she dies because of this.
Yeah. That is not in Xenosaga 2.
No. So this is an added scene in the DS version of Xenosaga 1 and 2.
A part of why this is important is because Xenosaga 1 and 2 was directed by Takahashi, right? And he changed, the parts that he changed were in order to make Xenosaga 2 fall more in line with his original vision, so that 1 and 3 could be connected a little bit better.
That's right.
So this scene likely was supposed to be in Xenosaga 2.
And was cut.
Yeah.
Okay, she dies. Albedo screams for her to regenerate because Rubido will soon show up. So Rubido is not there. Yeah. This is Sakura and Albedo, and he's trying to get her like, wake up, like he's coming, right? Anyway, he is the reason that Sakura died, and he knew it. Second important scene added was that Sakura's remains, or that she remains after she dies in the UMN, protecting Momo's consciousness after Albedo stole the Y data. So after the scene where Momo falls unconscious, I should say, and they do the encephalon dive, Sakura had remained in the UMN and was sort of there protecting Momo's consciousness during that part. Also, she shows up to Junior and says a last goodbye to him in that moment during that encephalon dive.
Was this the part that we thought was strange? No, that was chaos. That was when...
This is what clarifies that. So that actually
so that
was
Sakura.
chaos pretending to be Sakura at the end of the game.
But this says she shows up to Junior.
During the encephalon dive before the end of the game.
Okay.
So we have the encephalon dive somewhere in the middle of Xenosaga II.
Right.
At the end of the game, when Junior goes into the space anomaly and fights Albedo as the final boss, when Sakura shows up in that scene, that's chaos. So that's not the real Sakura. Sakura had said her final goodbye back in the middle of the game during the encephalon dive sequence. Okay. So that's a clarification there that I think is important too. Let's see. It also shows something important in my opinion. Shion's hidden fear of realians and how the Blue Testament teases her about this. The trip to Old Miltia has a lot more scenes with the Testaments. So,
okay, cool.
Thank you for that. Really, really appreciate it because that leads into, actually, perfectly leads into my first note for today, which is a quote from Xenosaga.
Oh, good.
About the differences in the game Xenosaga Ep.III we received versus what was planned for that story. So what Xenosaga says is, it's so complicated to fill the unexpected gap generated in Episode 2. The subsequent plot had to shift its course to some extent from where it was supposed to be. There were many major changes, but what's done cannot be undone. So there's no looking back on those might have beens.
Right.
So there are major changes in the Xenosaga Episode 3 story from what was supposed to be there because of, even maybe despite the changes to the DS version that Takahashi stepped in to add back into the story.
Right.
We are still going to land in different places here than was the original plan.
Okay.
The reason I want to say that is because when I got to the end of my playthrough of Xenosaga 3, I kind of felt that way.
Okay.
And I'm not even sure why, because I don't know what the original plan was. But it just felt like there were certain things planted that did not resolve, or things that were set up either at the beginning of this game or at the beginning of the series in Xenosaga 1 or whatever, that it felt like, well, what about that mystery? We didn't quite get to the end of that. Right. And there's two things to keep in mind about this. One is this. There were obviously major changes made, but there were also supposed to be more stories after Shion and group.
Right, yeah.
So it's hard to know, were they going to pay off this mystery in some future timeline of Xenosaga in an episode 4 or 5 or 6, or did they just get so bogged down that they weren't quite able to tell the story they wanted, even in the Shion part of the story? So those are unanswered questions, but I did feel a little bit this sort of inevitable, there's some pieces of the jigsaw missing here.
Gotcha.
That being said, all that being said, I love the beginning act of the first act, which is what we're covering today, chapters 1 through 3. I think are phenomenal
very
fun. Xenosaga 3. I think they're just really, 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 really strong. The visuals are outstanding. This is like,
it looks great.
I mean,
looks really good.
Possibly no surprise. This is 2006 at this point. We're getting pretty close to
this is the end of the PS2,
Yeah, we're getting into nearly the PS3 generation upon us. So like, the hardware, these companies have been working on this for 2 games before this, and they've had time to like really learn it. But it just is so impressive. And there's a lot of techniques that they use. I love how they sort of combine their 3D modeled areas with photographs of real mountains or cliffs or landscapes for the background. Which are, all things considered for a game of this generation, fairly high-res images.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
of course, if you're playing this in Ultra HD on like a modern, like OLED screen that's like giant, you'll be able to see some pixelation in those backgrounds. They won't quite match.
Right.
But on a CRT or maybe like plasma screen from that era,
like a 720,
those would have really meshed together quite well.
Right.
And so I noticed this on the beach.
Oh, yeah.
With the cliffs in the background.
Yeah.
The orbital space station just really blew me away. Like when Shion first arrives there and you can look out the window at the Merkaba being built in the distance, and you see all those little ships just like going back and forth and working on it. There are certain views in the city on 5th Jerusalem where you kind of walk up to a ledge in the park and you just see like the sprawling city and like, oh, the little people walking on the walkways and the cars. And then Rennes-le-Château itself out in space, which is a straight up just an image of some forest mountainous landscape that they sort of cut.
Right, yeah.
Into this landmass that's out there floating. All of it looks really, really good.
Yeah, it looks wonderful.
So it's a variety of techniques. The way that they use lighting and baked shading and all kinds of things in the environments, on the character models themselves, makes for an extremely cohesive vision for the art direction that just is executed to perfection, I feel like.
Yeah, everything meshes perfectly.
Very few games of this era that I would say look better than Xenosaga III.
Nice.
Like, I can't think, I mean... Even if we're talking about games with very different styles, say like Shadow of the Colossus or something, which I also think is one of the best looking games.
Right.
Still, the details in this are finer because the areas aren't as big. They're not rendering as much geometry.
Right.
And so like you get that fine detail and high resolution textures on the clothing and on the environments in a way you don't get in Shadow of the Colossus because that's all meant to make your character look teeny, teeny, tiny and see these giants in the background. Anyway, this on top of the pacing of the story, the music, the way that everything moves, it just feels like really, really masterful. It feels very cohesive. So I was thrilled with the first part of the story here we're talking about. Nice. I don't know what your feelings were on it, but those were mine.
Well, I still don't, so I have not beaten the game as of yet. I still don't know exactly where it's going, but I have enjoyed it a ton up to this point. It's really fun.
Yeah. So I thought it was really interesting that the very first scene that they start out on is back on Mictum, not Milsha, but Mictum, which is Abraxas from Pied Piper.
Now we will make it to Milsha eventually.
Yes.
But the beginning here is on Mictum, which is Pied Piper, which a lot of people had not played, of course. Yes. And then they show us the character. You don't hear his name, I don't think. You don't really know who this is right away at the beginning.
But
yes, you do.
But you do.
You do if you just played Xenosaga 2 and if you have been taking detailed notes and all that stuff. But initially, I was like, "Who is this?" Well, I didn't really know, and I was thinking maybe this is a young Shion. Is kind of what I was initially thinking. I was like, "No, the hair doesn't match up. This doesn't work." Oh, okay, it's a young boy. Okay, I get it now. It took a little bit for me to really get who this was, and not least because he took the necklace, right?
Right.
Which is a necklace that we see on Shion.
Yeah.
But anyway, but you don't know exactly. I guess you do see that scene earlier on of him giving her a necklace. Is that correct?
I'm trying to remember if we saw that in Xenosaga 2 maybe, but...
I feel like we may have seen it before.
I know we brought it up in the Xenosaga 2 analysis. We brought up the pendant being a gift from Kevin.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If you've been paying attention, you would know who that is.
It's Kevin. But it took me a little bit at first, and I was all for it. It's not like I was upset. I was like, ooh, a new mystery. Interesting. And by the end of it, I was like, oh, this is Kevin, which in some ways kind of put everything into place for me, but in other ways made it even more mysterious, right? Okay, here's his mother. This is what happened to him. He lost his family, right? He got like jetted out of there alone as during this like mass destruction event. That was painful for everybody. He was screaming. He got this necklace and leaves. We get to see a background on Kevin, which is, I'm a third of the way through the game yet. And it's interesting that they chose to start on that scene with Kevin, and then we don't really see Kevin again for a while. And I know there's an asterisk there, but it's fascinating that they chose to do that and then kind of move into everything else. Now, I get why they did that now, even a third of the way into the game. But initially, I was like, it kind of felt a little bit irrelevant at the time. I was like, okay, this is very interesting, very interesting. So anyways, I want to know about Shion and all the other people, right? Like, Kevin was not so important to me to understand exactly what he was doing at the time when he was little. And as I've progressed through the game, I'm slowly coming to realize that that is quite important, actually. And especially as it relates to KOS-MOS and all this stuff. Like Kevin still has a large role to play in this story.
Yeah. I think if you've been following this Xeno saga that we're on, I'm talking about a saga through Xenogear, Xenosaga, at some future point, Xenoblade. It should be clear to you at this point that Tetsuya Takahashi is a very purposeful storyteller. He's not doing anything without a reason. And this is very, very true of his introductory sequences. He is not just showing you this thing, oh, look at this cool scene. Okay, let's go to another cool scene. There's a plan here. There's a purpose to it. There's a reason why you're seeing Kevin first of anything he could have chose to show you first in the game. Right. He chose to show you Kevin's past. This is very important for a number of reasons. But I'm going to put a spoiler warning right here, and it's only going to be about 10 seconds long. So skip 10 seconds right now. This is why he cuts straight to Red Testament as the very next scene.
I slowly picked up on that.
Yeah.
I slowly picked up on that.
Okay.
Fascinating stuff.
Spoilers over at this point.
No spoilers.
Thank you for bearing with us on that, but I think it's important to point to that thing we just talked about.
Yes.
So
the necklace, by the way, just to add another, I probably made a note of this earlier on because we've talked about this before, but it looks like the jewel at the center of the Zohar. It's the same color. It's like that little, it just looks, it's a similar shape and a similar color to the jewel at the center of the Zohar. So that's something just worth pointing out right away. Yeah. That it first belonged to Kevin's mother and that she was wearing it. And then he gives it to Shion.
So the fact that Kevin and his mother lived on Mictum, formerly Abraxas, is an indication that they were descendants of the immigrant fleet.
Right.
If people who are watching this have not seen our Piper episode, the immigrant fleet is a separate sort of group of people who escaped Lost Jerusalem from the Federation.
Right.
The Federation sort of is one group that escaped that sort of formed their own government, and then the immigrant fleet was a second one. And they have never actually ended up unifying. They've always been separate factions or organizations.
Yeah.
And they've sort of contended with each other over regions and things like that, but most specifically over this planet, Mictum Abraxas.
Right.
That was the landing spot, the first planet they colonized, the immigrant fleet colonized after escaping Lost Jerusalem. And the immigrant fleet took with them the Zohar and many of the relics from Lost Jerusalem. Right. They sort of safeguarded that. Yeah. And so Ormus, the religious institution that was set up as their religion, sort of took on the responsibility of guarding and protecting those relics from Lost Jerusalem, with the intention in the future to be able to go back to Lost Jerusalem using these relics from the time. So Kevin and his mother are from that faction, from the immigrant fleet.
The immigrant fleet, yeah.
They are descended from those who colonized Abraxas / Mictum and lived there and made that their sort of base of operations. So I wanted to put here that they have some symbols on their clothing that I think are relevant to the goals.
I thought so too.
Of, the testaments, the goals of Wilhelm, and by extension Wilhelm, of course, and Ormus and all those Utic that are kind of part of that arm that Wilhelm, that we know Wilhelm is manipulating.
Yeah.
So it's a 3-dot symbol that sort of forms a triangle.
And it's all, they're connected. You have 3 circles connected. Yeah.
Right. And this symbol is used a lot through
it
cultures in the world and through history. And it has meant many different things.
It has. But if we're going to take Takahashi, the quote that we read, I think towards the end of episode 2, maybe in the in-between episode with Missing Year or something like that, that Takahashi said that the focus here is Christianity because it was the ubiquitous religion, right?
Yeah.
And the 3 circles in Christianity represents the Trinity.
The Holy Trinity.
Yeah. And you see that on lots of old ancient cathedral artwork and stuff. You get the 3 circles all connected.
Right. So I wrote down a few different things that this symbol has represented, and what I think, maybe on top of that, is an important symbol for where we're going in this game.
Oh, good.
So you see it on the clothing of Kevin and his mother in the opening scene on Mictum. It also appears on the uniforms of the Testaments on their backs.
Testaments have it. Doctus as well has the three circles.
Yeah.
But the child has 4. He has 4 circles.
You're talking about Kevin?
Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kevin's shirt has 4, but everyone else has 3.
Yeah. So this symbol has many meanings across different cultures. It has represented things like body, mind, and spirit.
Okay.
Past, present, and future.
Yes.
In Hindu cultures, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, which represent the creation, preservation, and destruction, those 3 Hindu deities.
Also similar to like a past, present, future thing there as well.
Yes, exactly.
And a triune, there's a way to map that onto the Trinity as well.
I have also seen it represented as the third eye, right?
Yes.
The opening of the third eye,
right.
The third eye at the top.
Which is important. I've actually made note in episode 3. They keep changing KOS-MOS's design, like usually not too much, but the fact that KOS-MOS has like a moon on her forehead, that's the shape of a moon, but it's in the place of the third eye, basically.
Yes.
That KOS-MOS has some third eye symbolism too there, although it seems, up to where I've played, that the idea that she has the third eye is very clearly presented, but it almost feels like with the symbolism that they're showing that her third eye is currently shut.
Right.
Right. That she has it, but it's shut.
Oh, yeah. It's like a closed
that
third
it
eye.
can
It can open as a potential.
at some point.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
But that's good. I like that the 3 circles is like the third eye.
Yeah, we talked about the third eye and its meaning a lot more in the analysis that we did on always forget the freaking title of the movie.
Jacob's Ladder?
No.
I can't remember.
Guillermo del Toro.
Pan's Labyrinth.
Pan's Labyrinth. Thank you.
Very cool. Yes.
So we talked about that a lot in Pan's Labyrinth because that symbol was pretty prevalent in that movie.
Right.
So if you want to learn more about that, I would suggest watching that. But in essence, the idea is you have your 2 physical eyes and you have a third sort of spiritual eye. It's like it's like a 6th sense that when that opens up, you are able to understand, know, and observe truths that you cannot see through your regular physical senses. It's more of a spiritual third eye that gives you wisdom and knowledge beyond what we can know here in sort of the physical realm.
Well, what's important about the third eye is that it is just one eye. And there's a reason why it's like you don't have 2, another pair of eyes that looks around. No. The spiritual world is the world of unity. There's one eye because it sees one thing. Your material eyes are seeing 2 separate things because the material world is one of many things, right? There's so much stuff. But what connects them all together into one thing? That's what the third eye sees. The third eye sees the unity, the relationship between the multiple objects that makes them all cohere into one single thing, right?
Yes.
So you got one eye there to see the spiritual, but then 2 eyes to kind of discern what the material is all about, right?
I'm glad you bring that up because that's another thing that this symbol means. It is a symbol of unity or balance.
Yes, sure, yeah.
So you have these
Triforce,
2
right?
points.
It's like the Triforce.
Yeah, you have 2 points, and between them, connected together, is what brings the whole image into balance.
Right.
So something that's in the center and something that has a different perspective. It's on another plane, a plane above on the y-axis, right?
Yeah, right.
We talked
it's
about...
like a separate dimension almost.
Yeah, we talked about triangulation as a means of like finding out your position or the position of a thing. Alan Watts talks about this. So that's another thing that this represents. However, for this game, I think that it likely represents the idea of a new cycle. This is another thing that the symbol means.
Okay.
With each dot representing something akin to those Hindu gods. But creation,
yes.
destruction, and renewal
Right.
being the three key points of a cycle.
Right.
I think that is big.
Well, we talk about what is it? Do they call it the Circle of Zarathustra? Is that what it's called in this game? The circle or the cycle?
Yes.
Something like that?
Cycle, and
they referred to it in the end of episode 2.
You will see this image in the game's logo. There in the game's logo, there's a circular sort of structure behind the Xenosaga III title there. So you'll see that in the logo, but you'll also see that same object on the desk of Wilhelm. So in Wilhelm's office on his ship, if you look on his desk, you will see that same circular object on his desk.
Okay, cool.
And so, yes, what you are talking about is also seen in that object or symbol. So, the idea of a cycle or of, again, creation, destruction, renewal is, I think, a big key as to what they're using this symbol to represent. And I think it's key to why you find that specifically on the Testament's uniforms. But it's also interesting that same symbol was found on, Kevin and his mother on Mictum.
Right. Yeah.
So we'll talk more about that connection as we go on. But that symbol and its prevalence, particularly early on, is placed purposefully and is really, really pointing to a strong thematic core that the game is going for. Yeah. So the number 3 in general too has a lot of significance throughout human cultures. So in Christianity, of course, it represents the Holy Trinity. In Buddhism, the number 3 is linked to the 3 jewels. So you have the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, which are kind of the 3 pillars of Buddhist teachings that guide its followers on the path of enlightenment, wisdom, and ethical conduct. Wisdom, ethical conduct, and meditation are the 3. Okay.
Well, and that's how you attain enlightenment.
You attain enlightenment through those 3.
Yeah.
In numerology, the number 3 represents creativity, communication, self-expression. We tell our stories in 3-act structures or in trilogies. Right. And many of the parables, say, of the Bible, they unfold in kind of 3 parts, right? The Good Samaritan's a great example. So you have a priest who comes first and sees the man who's been robbed and passes by. Then a Levite, step 2, comes by, passes by. It's the Samaritan, the 3rd, who comes by, recognizes that he needs help and helps him. You also see this a lot in video game, boss design. A lot of Nintendo games.
Mario, you have to hit Bowser 3 times.
There's 3 steps to it.
Yep,
you got to go through, a lot of Zelda bosses are like this too.
Yeah, 3 stages.
Let's just take, for example, Goma, the first boss of Ocarina of Time. It's up there crawling on the ceiling, and it'll drop down and fight you, and you hit it with your sword, and then it goes up, and you have to shoot it down again, hit it with your sword, it goes up to the top, you shoot it down, hit it with your sword. The 3rd cycle of that is when, typically, unless you're just really, really bad at the game and you're only hitting it one time with your sword, but it's done into sort of 3 cycles, and on the 3rd cycle, generally, you will finish the boss. And that is true through almost every boss of the whole game.
And then, once you finish the boss, you get one of 3 jewels from the Deku Tree, and then the 3 jewels that to then take to the Temple of Time.
Right.
Another idea of 3 is that 3 is the minimum number required to recognize a pattern, right? So if you have a thing and then you have another thing, there is no discernible pattern between 2 things. But if you have a yes, no, yes, then you have a dun, dun, dun. You have a pattern, right?
Yeah.
You have red, blue, red, or anyways, the minimum number of things to see in order to recognize a pattern is 3. Also, whenever you see anything, actually, you're as my theory of just sight, you're always seeing 3 things, no matter what. This is also the structure of the atom, that there's tons of different particles, but the way the different particles cohere together into atoms, which is, the material world, is in this tripartite structure, right? The temple for the Jewish temple, for the Temple of Solomon, was also divided into 3 structures, and then you have the charges neutral, positive, and negative for the electron, neutron, and protons. But in order to see something, you first have to distinguish it from everything else, right? So you're actually seeing two things. You're seeing the background and the thing itself, right? Because you can't just see a white thing in a background of white. You can't see it. There has to be some separation, which means you're actually seeing two things, but you're focusing on the one. But in seeing two things, there's a secret third thing, which is the relationship between the two, which isn't just, it's the border, like with the yin yang. It's the space in between the thing and the background, right? And it's the relationship, the border. So it's difficult to ever actually, it's impossible, in my opinion, to ever actually see one thing. You're always seeing at minimum three things, right? In order to discern one thing, you have to see three things.
This is exactly what Alan Watts talks about with essentially opposites. One thing implies the other. You can't have the one thing without the other.
You can't.
Because you can't see a background without something in the foreground to compare it to.
Otherwise, you can't see it. You just can't see it. And then once you see it, a third thing just emerges, which is the relationship between the two.
Right.
The border, that kind of stuff. So yeah, tons of things. Also, I got to mention, because you've been reading some Grimm's fairy tales too, right? There's always three kids, right? It's always three sons or three daughters or three princes. It doesn't matter. Whatever there is, there are three of it.
The parables in the New Testament that Jesus teaches are very much structured in line with old myths and fairy tales. They do these things in 3 steps. The 3 little pigs, right?
Yes,
there's always
Goldilocks
3
and the 3 bears.
And the 3 bears. So 3
because more than 3 is just superfluous. You only need 3 to get the point
to
across.
recognize the pattern or the point.
Exactly.
Yes. So that's why they were structured that way, and that's why this symbol is so universal, but also why it's going to be important to what we're getting at with this story in regards to what we talked all about last week with Nietzsche and eternal recurrence. So keep all that in mind. It's just interesting stuff to see how well they know where they're going. These are not random scenes that they just thought were cool and they decided to put in there. They are very purposefully working towards a vision and a goal for their ending, and these are planting the seeds that are going to grow into that message.
I always respect that.
No, I love
that.
It's literally how you should write stories.
Absolutely. And everything should be incorporated. You shouldn't have this dissonance between the visual image and then the story or any of this stuff. They should cohere very easily together, which means they need to be pre-planned well ahead of time. Right. But I do have to point out, though, that Kevin does have 4 circles on his coat as he's leaving.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, just a little bit. The number 4 just means it's in between heaven and earth. That 3 is something like heaven. Well, 1 is God, 3 is heaven, 4 is earth. The 4 corners of earth, that just the number 4 typically means earth. And I don't know exactly what it's saying in regards to Kevin. The 3 seems pretty straightforward, but the fact that every now and then somebody has 4 circles, it's just, I believe it's just meant to distinguish them, to say that they're different. There's a difference here, right? This pattern is similar, but the number being 1 more just makes it different. And just notice that. That's I'm just holding it in my mind for now.
So in that first scene, it basically tells the story of how Kevin got separated from his mother. His mother turned into a Gnosis, and he was sort of blasted off the planet and was able to escape the disaster that happened.
By the way, that shot where you see the planet just and then the pods being escaped, it's just really cool. It looks really good.
Awesome.
The matte paintings are wonderful.
Yes. Again, visually, this is, it's not close. This is the visually strongest game in the trilogy.
Yeah.
I went back and watched some scenes from the first game a little bit. Because what I was trying to remember is that woman, Kevin's mother, the Gnosis that Junior shows them in the Durando when they go, remember when he shows them the Gnosis? They have samples of them for the first time.
I remember
and there's a woman that is sort of in stasis there. I was like, is that Kevin's? It's not.
Okay.
But I was going back because I was like, wait a minute, is that her? It isn't.
That.
But in doing that and watching the scenes from episode 1, I was like, this looks terrible in comparison.
Like a previous generation.
It's like, and it kind of is, because you get one at the very beginning of the PlayStation 2 generation, which is kind of like a really, really good PlayStation 1 game or something like that, right?
It's like the difference between Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2. There's a huge difference there.
And then you get to the very end of the generation with this, and it's like it's bordering on being good enough to be an HD game in the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 era. So, you know, you have two extremes there. So it's to be expected, but I mean, it's really quite drastic when you go make a comparison from one to the other.
Yeah, that's funny.
And the step in between, which is Xenosaga Ep.II, which I think looks fine for the most part, despite people's grievances with the changes of character design and whatnot, it still just is not even close. And we talked about the reasons why in that. We talked about the lack of dynamic lighting and shading and things like this that would help elements blend together better.
That's right, yeah.
Here it is
they have it
just really, really well done.
That's awesome.
They took a lot of time, you can tell, in blending and in compositing these images together. Their matte paintings or background images
they blend,
with their 3D models in the foreground. Yeah. So it's all just really excellent. Now, the scene we cut to right after that is the testaments on Rennes-le-Château.
Yep.
In the tomb, where they've opened it and they're looking inside, and there's a woman in there.
Yes.
And Virgil's making his sort of crude, jokes about, ooh, she smells great, I'm in love already, or whatever. He's being annoying like he usually is, I think, just trying to get on people's nerves and be irritating. The Red Testament just doesn't really seem to be bothered by him. The Red Testament, it seems to me, is the one that's sort of the one in command of the testaments. He's all about business. He's there to do what he's doing. He's not really bothered by Virgil. The other two are kind of quiet and don't really say anything in the scene. But we know, because of how far we've played, that this is Rennes-le-Château. We get there later and actually see this exact area.
We do, and we have seen this area before.
Yes.
In Xenosaga Ep.1, at the Encephalon dive, we see KOS-MOS like crucified on that stone cross that is behind the Red Testament. And later on, when we get there, Shion asks KOS-MOS, like, hey, have you been here before? Do you have any memory of this place? And KOS-MOS says no, right? So that's just an interesting mystery right then and there. Why did she have this image of herself being crucified here with like wires and stuff at this exact place if she has no memory of ever being there in any way? But yeah, we've seen this place before, and there's the what would you call it? Sarcophagus? Something like that?
Yeah, the tomb, whatever.
That is in front of the cross. And this is a saint that is buried here. This is the idea.
Right.
We find out who it is later on. But
yes. I would like to talk about the real-life Rennes-le-Château very briefly.
Sounds good.
This is the kind of thing you could get into a massive rabbit hole with.
Oh, apparently there is like treasure, lots of treasure buried down there somewhere, I've heard.
The story of Rennes-le-Château is crazy. It has been the subject of long-form documentaries. I think BBC did one.
Long time.
And more recently in movies and novels such as The Da Vinci Code.
Yeah.
Basically, it's this commune in the south of France. It's a very small village, kind of on the top of a plateau. And it's known internationally and receives tens of thousands of visitors per year, drawn by conspiracy theories surrounding a putative buried treasure discovered by its 19th century priest, Beneger Saunier or something like that, or Saunier. The precise nature of which is disputed among those who credit its existence. So essentially what happened was this priest gets sent to this little village to, sort of manage the church that they have there. Yeah. He wants to do some renovations because it's a very, very old building. And he's very poor. He arrives there basically destitute, has no money at all, lives in like a shack, like not even an actual home there, doesn't have the money for that.
Right.
All of a sudden, the dude disappears for a bit, comes back with tons of money, and starts making these lavish renovations to the church.
Yeah.
And starts putting all kinds of really bizarre sort of demonic or satanic imagery in the church along with the, normal sort of imagery you would see in there, whether it's, the church is actually...
Gargoyles.
Well, yeah.
Catholic churches have gargoyles.
They do on the outside for the most
the most
part. That's true. The one in Quito when I was there in Ecuador. It actually has animals from the Galapagos Islands rather than the
so
gargoyles,
cool.
which is really sweet.
Man, say what you will about the Catholic Church, but I love that they tailor. Like there's like Saint Mary of Guadalupe, right? It's the Virgin Mary, but it's like the Mexican version, and it's like anyways, the way that the church has kind of like shifted itself to fit into all the different cultures and to allow a lot of their previous cultures to kind of still be expressed in certain ways, even when Christianity comes and kind of takes over, so to speak.
Sure.
Is I think it's great. I think it's awesome. Yeah. And especially on the outside of the church, to decorate it with things from the previous culture I think it's really cool, at least in part. Like these are the cherubim, these are the guardians at the Garden of Eden, where they're like, it's like a monster, right? If you show up there and you're not supposed to be there, then that cherubim is going to cut you down, right? It's like it's a monster, but it's on the outside of the church and it's like facing outwards.
Right.
I just think that's the coolest concept.
Yeah. But the church there in Rennes-le-Château is the Church of Saint Mary Magdalene.
Yes, and so that's how I found out who this saint was, not through the game, but through what is Rennes-le-Château. Oh, interesting. It's Mary Magdalene. It's the Church of Mary Magdalene. I don't think the church has ever made any claims that she is buried there.
Right. Well, why would she be in France? It's crazy.
Exactly. Well, the Da Vinci Code.
The Da Vinci Code tries to explain that away.
A whole reason.
The conspiracy as to how that happened. Yes.
And the bloodline of Christ, which is the true Holy Grail, all that stuff. Like there's a lot of conspiracies about this place and that this is where the descendants of Christ all came to. And I don't know how far Xenosaga III is going into that. I don't know.
Not really.
Okay. It's just naming the place as interesting because that before Da Vinci Code, there was a book written around like 1980 or so that claimed that Mary Magdalene was something along the lines of the wife of Jesus and that she came to Rennes-le-Château and she bore the children of Jesus and that his bloodline continues, from that little community there.
Right.
And that's the treasure that is there. It's not a treasure. It's like the people.
And so the conspiracy was that this priest either found some document that essentially proved that, some sufficiently ancient document that was in the sepulcher or somewhere, or found some sort of treasure which he sold, got all this money and started making the renovations.
Which is possible. With the Knights Templar and a bunch of the old orders that existed around the time of the Crusades, there was a lot of wealth that was acquired by...
It's a very generous word.
By the knights of Europe as they, went around doing their thing. And a lot of people don't know exactly where a lot of that stuff ended up. A lot of these stockpiles, a lot of this wealth, where did it end up? And it could very well be that there are masses of treasure in all sorts of places, especially in the Mediterranean and maybe Southern Europe, So it could be that once upon a time there was something like that in Rennes-le-Château from one of the ancient orders of knights.
That's as far down that rabbit hole as I care to go. You can go much further. If you care to do that, be my guest.
Suffice it to say that the church at Rennes-le-Château is the Church of Mary Magdalene. That is the saint, the patron saint of that church.
Yes.
And so...
And
Xenosaga
it
III,
is
that is who they found.
The subject of, it's considered a holy place.
Yeah.
And so in this game, Rennes-le-Château, this little chunk of literally lost Jerusalem that survived whatever event made it disappear, is considered almost like holy place.
Yeah.
A place that must be defended. Because their saint is buried there.
Gotcha.
Right?
It's almost as though this place, Rennes-le-Château, being the only surviving hunk of land from old Jerusalem or from the old earth, I'm assuming this is where this comes from.
Yes.
That the land itself is basically a relic of the sacred home of humans, right? Where we come from. And so it is a sacred place in a lot. And then there's in the sacred place is a more sacred place, the Holy of Holies, right? And that is where there is the saint and the relic and all that kind of stuff. I wonder if there are any relics of Mary Magdalene or anything like that.
Oh, you mean like in real life?
Yeah.
I'm sure there are.
Just, I wonder if they're at Rennes-le-Château there. I wonder if that's kind of maybe what they're talking about.
Or at least relics they claim from
we don't
who that was. But anyway, point is, this is a holy place for Ormus. It's called that because it's a reference to this place in real life, Church of St. Mary Magdalene. Now, this is why when Margulis finds out that like Jin and that group of the Elsa are going there to investigate it, he gets like immediately pissed. It's like, no, they must not be allowed to set foot on the Holy Land, and like takes off to do a battle with you there, which is a freaking sweet mech battle in space. Rennes-le-Château in the background.
It was very cool.
It's like a freaking cool like
and once again
set piece, right?
It made me think of like we did a video years ago about like Star Fox, like a space battle with Star Fox, and I'm like, man, we should have really, if we had played this game, if we had like maybe taken cues as to how these cutscenes went, we could have really vastly improved our CG game
for sure
back in the day.
For sure. A big part of, and this is something that was true in the Star Wars trilogy, particularly in Return of the Jedi, that big battle that happens there above the moon of Endor. So it's very difficult to film a space battle of this kind and have any reference as to where the action is and where things are in relation to each other without a big giant planet in the background.
You have to have that.
Right? And
you got to be very close to it.
Yes. Yeah. And so they use that very, very judiciously in those movies to give you a sense of space. Where am I in relation to what I'm seeing on screen? And so the way that they cut it, of course, using the 180-degree rule to keep you oriented, is so that it will help you know the bad guys are on this side, the good guys are on this side. They're pinned between the Death Star that is destroying them and then the Star Destroyer fleet, which they think they're not going to last long, but they'll last longer than against that Death Star. And so they go over there and start fighting, and in the background you have that Endor moon, and it helps you be able to follow the action. Right. Very similarly, they've set up a big battle here with a bunch of mechs that come with Margulis, and they're fighting you. They're right above using Rennes-le-Château as like a backdrop, which I thought was really cool. It looks nice, keeps you oriented. You can follow the action even though you're out in the middle of space somewhere.
And the fight is kind of crazy, but
it's great.
A bit disorienting, but it's really good.
But we're not there yet. But that is essentially what Rennes-le-Château is, and why Margulis was mad that they went there, and why he feels like it needs to be protected. Now, let's step back a little bit to the opening scene with Shion. So this is a dive sequence into the UMN. They are essentially infiltrating to steal top secret important information data from Vector. They are investigating Vector, and in particular, they want to understand better the origins of the UMN.
Right. Yes, because the claim is that, we created this whole thing, and that's how we did it. Super great technology. And Shion is saying, no, I'm pretty sure, and a lot of her own people, by the way, disagree. The Scientia.
By the way, that was not a pronunciation that I was expecting at all.
Scientia, whatever. Okay, Scientia.
There's a lot of things I could have seen them saying when that word came on screen. Scientia was not the one I was expecting.
No, but it is more in line with the old, Greek. Okay,
sure.
Fine. But that's not how it ought to be translated into English.
No, I don't think so.
But anyways, they kind of treat Shion as though she's kind of on a little bit of a wild, conspiracy theory here, where she says, I think the UMN was here already when they discovered it. They didn't create it.
Very Mass Effect-like.
Yeah, sure.
This was something planted before, and we don't even understand how it works. And somebody is using it to observe us and whatever, right? Very Mass Effect in that sense. Yeah, that's her theory, and they don't.
They're like, what?
They don't believe her.
Do you have any evidence? And she's like, I just feel it. So.
Well, now this requires at least one step back to talk a little bit about Scientia as an organization. We have already touched on this at length in Pied Piper and in Missing Year. So if you missed those episodes, you need to go back and watch them to get the full picture. But Scientia is an organization that is anti-UMN. They are against the fact that the Federation and the immigrant fleet are so reliant on the UMN for communication, faster than light communication, and faster than light travel. It facilitates both of those things. The other thing to keep in mind, in case you haven't been following all of the previous episodes on this Xenosaga series we've been doing, the UMN stands for Unus Mundus Network, which is a Jungian term, Carl Jung. And Carl Jung's whole thing was the collective unconscious.
The underlying foundation that's invisible that connects everything together.
Yes.
That from the Big Bang, it's just like this connection. Everything originates from the same place, therefore shares a relationship to each other.
Yes. And this is how a person on one side of the world and a person on the other side of the world might have the same idea without ever having talked to each other or coming from totally different cultures. Carl Jung's experience was he would carve little totems or like little figurines on his ruler at school, and he would do these little rituals, bring rocks and things and sort of pray at them. He's a very small child when he did this, found out there's a very similar ritual on the other side of the world he had never heard about before.
In the I Ching, China has similar stuff and similar looking icons as well, and that blew his mind because that's China. That's a complete opposite end from where he was at in Switzerland.
His way of explaining that phenomena was to say, we are all connected by something called this collective unconscious. We have this unconscious connection with all other people and living things on the planet, certainly, but in the universe. And so the UMN in Xenosaga is literally just the collective unconscious. But it's been used in technology to such a degree to where we can actually send faster-than-light communications and faster-than-light travel over enormous distances, all through this collective unconscious, which nobody actually understands and nobody invented, is Shion's working theory.
Yeah, we don't even know what we're dealing with here. Once again, some Pied Piper maybe similarities here where it's like, oh, a foreign thing showed up to solve all our problems. Let's go all in on it. And maybe our future generations will have to pay the price of our mistake. And that's how this usually goes. Right.
Another thing, and I'm glad you brought this up, Aidan, it's another symbol that I wanted to talk about. It's something we've already talked about because we've done 3 Xenosaga games, but the UMN's logo is the Ouroboros.
Ouroboros, something Carl Jung was fascinated
devouring its own tail.
Once again, a symbol that exists in every culture in the entire world. In the Maya, in the Amazon rainforest has the Ouroboros, the Norse up north, in Central Africa, in China, everyone in the world has that symbol. And just one more it's kind of idea that like these symbols almost exist in the mind already, pre-exist in the mind, and then are kind of expressed through artwork.
Yes. It is a universal symbol for the concept of eternity.
Yeah.
We talked a lot last week, if you watched that episode about Friedrich Nietzsche, which you need to understand this game.
You have to.
Eternal
Sorry, people, you gotta
recurrence.
Watch it.
Eternal recurrence is a huge thing in this game.
Right.
So we are getting the UMN's symbol being literally the same symbol of eternal recurrence, which is also the Ouroboros, which is used in other cultures, but Nietzsche used this for eternal recurrence.
But it's also creation, destruction, regeneration. Right. The Ouroboros is a self-sustaining thing. It feeds on itself. It continues. It has self-continuance, self-sustainability completely. And so it exists, and it is born out of itself currently, like forever, over and over, and it consumes itself, and then it is always... It is an ever-present thing. It always exists. It's also a symbol for time, just in general.
Yeah. So the whole point of this opening scene is that Shion is expressing doubt about the origins of this thing as they've been told, that Vector somehow invented the UMN.
Yeah.
She's saying, nope, I don't think that's true. They are there to try to find out more about that. Scientia's entire operation is all about like casting doubt on the way we use the UMN.
Yeah.
Canaan, who is there with her, is not a member of Scientia, and he's the one who casts the most doubt on Shion's theory about it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, do you have any proof of that? That's crazy. At the same time, Miyuki picks up some strange fractal noise that Canaan then explains is possibly an indication that they are being not only watched, but studied at that current moment. Somebody is using the UMN to watch them.
Right.
In their little infiltration here.
But there was some idea that it didn't manifest as an immediate threat. It was just a general hint that they were being watched, but not somehow that the person watching them had any ill intent or anything. It was something that didn't end their operation. That's more or less all I'm saying.
Yes.
It was like someone's kind of watching us, but it doesn't seem like that big a deal, and let's just keep finishing our job anyways.
Right.
Because normally it's like, hey, if you're being watched, get out
Somebody's
of there.
coming after.
But in this one, it was like, I don't know, they don't seem to like want to stop us. So
they're just studying.
They're just watching. Yeah.
And the payoff to this is, of course, Wilhelm in the Red Testament in a scene that comes up pretty shortly after this, say, hey, they got in, they got some data. Do you want to do something about that? No, Wilhelm says, it really doesn't matter at all. And I actually find it kind of endearing that they're trying so hard. They think that their little cage they live in is the whole world and that they can somehow change it. So he is confident enough in the events that are set in motion and is powerful enough, being at the head of Vector and everything, to be like, this doesn't matter. I actually it's kind of cute to me that they think that they can do something about this.
Oh, is this hubris? Is this pride? Will this be his downfall? We shall see.
Something to keep in mind.
We shall see.
Now, I took some notes on a couple of other symbols that appear on the clothing of the characters in this scene.
Are you going to talk about Miyuki?
Well, Miyuki and Shion have the same uniform. So they have the infinity symbol on the collar.
I didn't realize Shion had it. The infinity symbol is also a symbol of the Ouroboros.
Right.
The constant loop that never ends. Yeah.
Right.
Self-contained.
Yeah. Never-ending Story has that, what is the talisman called? The Auren or something like that?
Oh, yeah.
But it's a similar thing. It's a snake. It's two snakes, I think, kind of like devouring each other.
It's different when it's two snakes.
It's more in the symbol of the infinity.
Yeah.
The sort of number 8 looking, the sideways 8 looking infinity symbol.
I haven't seen the movie in so long.
It's so good. Oh my fetch. It's so good. Anyway, they've got that symbol kind of all over their uniform. They got it on their collar. They got it on their back. Miyuki's got it on her backpack. And Doctus has it on her sleeves. So you see it on Doctus's uniform as well.
Ooh, Doctus has all kinds of symbols on her. I wonder what's up with her, actually. She interests me.
Well, don't think about it too much because you're probably not going to get a sufficient answer. Anyway.
All right.
Canaan is the one character in this scene who has none of that imagery on his uniform.
Right.
His imagery is really interesting, though, and it is very important to keep it in mind. Okay. He has little eyeballs.
Yes, I've noticed
all over his uniform. There's a really, really big one right on his back.
Yeah.
But he's got I think it's either 4 or 6 kind of going down the front of his uniform. Like 2 kind of on the breast area, 2 on the waist, and 2 on the legs or something like that. So, yes. Canaan has eyes as the symbol for his character, signifying somebody who is observing, somebody who is watching.
Especially when there are lots of eyes and they are all over pointed in different directions. Right?
Yeah.
An important thing with Canaan, if he's got an eye behind him, it means that he can see behind him. That could have multiple things. It could be a third eye thing where it's he learns from the past. He's got 20/20 hindsight vision.
Well, because we know from Pied Piper,
right?
He 100 years ago.
That's more or less what I'm getting at.
And Wilhelm, I don't know if it was Wilhelm or his Voyager, who had pointed out that his entire purpose was to be an observer, even in that game. So he was sent there to observe Jan Sauer and that group and sort of be a spy.
Yeah.
Right. So even back then, he was being used. He was created by Vector, by the way.
Right, because Project Canaan.
Yes.
Are we going to get there in this?
So I think we should say
it's right towards the end.
It is in this part we played, so we might as well talk about it now.
Okay. Even if we don't quite get to it.
Sure.
There's a project called Project Canaan that Canaan does not seem aware of. So this concept of him being an observer, him being a watcher, Book of Enoch. Anyways, Book of Enoch has some interesting Xenogears references as well. So it's probably relevant to Xenosaga. But being the fact that he is just a watcher, but he doesn't know that. He doesn't know that that's more or less what he was designed to do and why he's here. So, but it's written on his clothes, but he doesn't know. And no one else does either, apparently.
Yes. Doctus confronts him about this. She finds this Canaan program.
Yep.
And she's like, what the heck is this? And she follows it it's basically implanted into Canaan's
And he's like, well, I don't know anything about it. And she goes, whether you know anything or not, that doesn't mean it isn't controlling you at some subconscious level.
Yeah.
And it's like, well. Okay.
And she basically threatens him, I'm keeping an eye on you. This is part of your central programming. I believe you that you don't know that.
Right.
But I'm telling you, I'm going to freaking kill you if you try anything.
And you may not even know, because you'll just be doing what you were programmed to do.
Right.
And I'm just going to show up and shoot you.
So when Canaan was Lictum, that was his name back in Pied Piper. Even then, he was a spy for Vector. And so that's basically what they're setting up. That's what his clothing is indicating. He is essentially a spy for Wilhelm, because Wilhelm is Vector. Right. So this is partially how he is watching them too, even though Canaan's not aware that is his function or his purpose. So lots of interesting stuff going on there right at the beginning. Let's move here into the Merkaba. So we're skipping out a little bit, but the operation is a success. They get some data. They go to analyze that. Shion is sort of hanging out on Second Miltia on like some secluded island beach thing. She's sort of like taking a break.
Yes.
And just living there while she does her little operations in conjunction with Scientia. I think I falsely stated in one of the prior episodes that she was working for Scientia. It's more that she's working with. She's collaborating with Scientia, not working for them. Anyways, this was one mission that they had set up. Miyuki, by the way, is still working at Vector, so that's supposed to be kept a secret.
Yes.
But this is how they keep getting in to places.
It is supposed to be a secret because later on when Shion talks with Alan and Miyuki calls and it's like, hey, I saw you yesterday. And Shion's like, no, you mean you haven't seen me in a long time, wink, wink. And she's like, oh, right.
Yes.
Miyuki's hilarious because they bring her on these top secret missions, but apparently she's just really clumsy and forgets things and is bad at everything. And they just expect it, but also she's still like there with them. And so
she's also like 17 or something. So like young people in these JRPGs are elevated to pretty high
so she's
levels
like,
of status.
In our world, she's like 30.
But
17 is 30.
She's basically the only contact they have that could help them in these situations.
So that's I was going to say.
In fact, I think Shion even says that. You were the only one I could call, and Miyuki's very like offended by that.
So Scientia is kind of bare bones then, right? Like they're a ragtag group. They're not.
Well, they're a fairly large organization in terms of millions belonging to it, but I don't know about their resources. I don't know about.
Maybe that's it. Okay.
I don't know about like exactly how well funded they are as an organization, for example. Okay. If they have millions of people, I would assume you could at least crowdfund a certain amount.
Right.
But
and if that is millions, you should be able to find competent people.
In comparison to Wilhelm and Vector, it pales in comparison. So
I wonder what's the human / Realian population of the universe in Xenosaga?
There's also the fact that much of the universe is being destroyed as we speak.
That's true.
The Gnosis are just swallowing up star systems all the time.
The way that they talk about it too is like tons of galaxies.
Yes.
Like tons of planets. Like thousands of planets a day are just being swallowed up all the time.
Yes.
I can't remember the numbers that they give at
it's
some
a lot.
point. But it was unfathomable. There could be as much as quadrillions of humans and Realians in the universe at this point.
Yeah.
So an organization with millions wouldn't actually be that big of a deal.
Yeah. So anyway, she's collaborating with Scientia. She's on this beach. Really, really cool visual location. She gets contacted by Alan, who says, "Hey, they're gonna cancel the KOS-MOS project. Right. We'd love to see you if you want to come back." And we then get some short scenes there where we see how she quit, like the day that she quit and told Alan this, and then another flashback with her and Kevin. And this conversation with Kevin I thought was really interesting because again, he's talking about KOS-MOS as if she's not just this weapon of mass destruction, but also a sort of like creator and protector of the universe.
Well, he talks about, is this where he talks about the symbolism of the feminine, just in general?
Yes.
Says that throughout history, it's always a woman that people can place their hopes in because women have this, regenerative ability to create new things.
They're healers and things
healers,
like that.
That's right. And
Shion's tries to like, well, there are a lot of men that are healers too. And
he's like, yes, but
history has been told from a male perspective and all this stuff.
Right, sure. Yeah. Which is funny too, because then he brings in the female perspective of men just destroy everything. Also build some stuff too, but okay, fine. That's fine. He's just kind of trying to lend credence to both sides, but at the same time assert his idea that, look, KOS-MOS has to be female. And that's why the prototype, pre-KOS-MOS.
The
thing?
The archetype.
It was the archetype.
Yes.
Okay, so the archetype and KOS-MOS and T-elos are all they're all women, right?
Yes.
And it almost has to be the case. And it's interesting because there is that dual side where that women do have both sides, right? They can be, very like mama bear type stuff, right?
Sure.
Like you do not cross a woman at certain times in certain places, but at the same time, they can be the most nurturing. And I kind of get that with KOS-MOS. We've only seen her destructive mama bear mode so far, but that Kevin is heavily implying every scene that we have with him, that there is this other side of KOS-MOS, which is actually the real reason why KOS-MOS is female and not male.
Right.
So that's fascinating too. I actually really liked that discussion that they had.
Yeah. So she decides she's going to go to Fifth Jerusalem, which is the capital of the Federation.
Yeah.
And go meet up with Alan and sort of like, visit and stuff like that.
That's also, where Vector is, right?
So...
Or, Vector?
Well...
Vector, right?
I know they had a Vector headquarters on Second Miltia in the second game, but I'm sure they have one here too.
Because I'm pretty sure Alan gets called back into work, and I think it's there. I think it's at that city.
I mean, he got transferred there. So he mentions that they got transferred from Second Miltia.
Alan's the new chief, by
yes,
the way.
he's the new chief replace Shion.
It's just hilarious. You've got like the most highest top secret, like Oppenheimer, right? Like when the United States had the top secret thing that was going to win wars and change the world. It was like, let's get like the best physicist alive, like Einstein and Oppenheimer, and let's get these people to work on it. And whereas in this world, it's like, well, Alan's like 26.
Yes,
he can do it.
But
he's the chief.
Keep in mind here that the KOS-MOS project is being canceled anyways.
Oh, that's true. At the moment.
And at this point, Roth Mantel has come in, and the T-elos project is going to be replacing
can't wait to talk about
KOS-MOS.
That. Yes.
So he's been elevated within this team that's about to get freaking fired.
It's about to get axed anyways.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Anyway.
But it's funny that it's gone from Kevin to Shion to Alan. And it's like, is anyone over the age of 30 like having anything to do with this super top secret thing? I don't know. Maybe not.
Anyway, she just has to go back. So when she arrives there, in the orbital space station that has a space elevator, which I just thought was really cool. A space elevator that goes down to the planet and up.
Well, it's a ladder to heaven. It's the Jacob's ladder type thing.
Exactly.
But,
but also, it's just a much more efficient way of getting into orbit than
instead of rockets. Like massive fuel expenditure. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So it's a really, really cool set piece. But my favorite part is that in the background, you can see through the windows on the space station, right? You can see the Merkaba
that's right.
being constructed out there in the distance. And right away they tell you, hey, they have this whole like showroom down on Fifth Jerusalem where you can learn more about the Merkaba.
Right.
So this is essentially this giant space station weapon that's going to be like the ultimate weapon against the Gnosis. The Federation's answer against the Gnosis, right? So Merkaba or Merkava, mysticism, is a school of early Jewish mysticism from about 100 BCE to 1000 CE, centered on visions such as those found in Ezekiel 1 concerning stories of ascents to the heavenly places and to the throne of God.
Yep.
The main corpus of the Merkaba literature was composed in a period between 200 and 700 CE, although later references to the chariot tradition can also be found in other places. I think the rest of that don't need to read. But I think the word itself references a sort of a chariot or a sort of...
Yes, Merkava would be the chariot. Yeah, that's true. That's correct.
Right.
And Ezekiel basically goes up to heaven on a chariot.
On a chariot.
A chariot of fire drawn by...
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where that word comes from. We talked about that in a lot more detail in our Xenogears analysis. But essentially, the concept of this word being used for some kind of military weapon is not unprecedented. The Israeli military has tanks that are called Merkava.
I didn't know that,
yes,
really.
They do. So this is, something that happens in real life.
Don't exhaust all your religious symbolism on military destructive elements.
So what's really interesting, you can go into this showroom and you can see all these different parts of the Merkaba, and they're talking about what they do, and in this section of the station this happens, and in this section they do this, and here's the quarters of the crew, and here's where they do this, and here's where they do that. This is where the Proto Omega or sorry, it's not Proto Omega, now it's just called Omega. The Omega will be stored. Currently, we don't have an energy source strong enough because we need the Zohar in order to give it like an infinite sort of like ability to be mobilized. But at the current moment, we can mobilize for about 30 minutes and we're still working. So they give you all these details about the Merkaba. And it's pretty freaking sweet. But the key you're supposed to take away from that is they have started convincing people that this is a very safe thing. And they've set up all this information to teach you about it, to show you how safe it is.
Yes.
But you have a few people in that showroom who are a little bit skeptical. Like, is it really as safe as they say it is? Is this really going to be the answer against the Gnosis? right? Which is the question
once again Pied
we're
Piper.
meant to be asking.
Yes, exactly. Yes, the minority conspiracy opinion is always the right opinion in video games.
Right.
Once again, the Pied Piper just straight up, right? It's like,
Yes.
hey, here's a thing. It's going to solve all our problems. It'll kill all of the rats. I mean, Gnosis. And, we're not going to tell you how much it costs because you might not be willing to pay it if you knew that up front.
The true
cost, the full cost in terms of,
right.
Yeah. But your kids are sure going to have to pay that.
Right. So again, this is all a setup. This is a storytelling 101 stuff. They are showing you something here to set up something for later.
Yeah, very good.
Right? And that's basically what your opening act of your story is all about.
Right.
You have this sort of like rising action, but you have exposition worked into that. And the exposition is not, the purpose of it is not to explain how awesome and big your world is.
Right.
It's to show you the pieces.
They don't seem too concerned about that in this game, I've noticed.
So here's just the thing for storytellers to keep in mind. You've built this big world. Yeah. Which pieces of it am I going to show in the scenes that I choose to give to my viewer, reader, whatever? Well, don't just pick the ones that you think are cool. You pick the ones that are relevant.
To a theme.
And to a climatic moment coming later. It's all supposed to build up and give context to that moment where all the emotional impact is delivered and your message is clearly given to your viewer. Yeah, what are you trying to say to them?
Yeah, the point of unity that brings up all the multiple things that you've brought, and then it connects them all together into that unified point. Yeah.
Right. So all of this imagery of the Merkava and seeing it in its majesty, and wow, that's so visually stunning. That's so cool. What an amazing feat that these humans have accomplished to fight against the Gnosis. Is it safe?
Yes.
Is the question.
Jurassic Park. What a brilliant feat these humans have.
Yes, exactly.
And then, there's a question you're supposed to be asking with that.
Yes. So all of that is context to build up to our big moment. So just keep all that in mind.
Very good.
So she goes out to meet with Alan in the Mobius Hotel, and he gets her a room there. And it's funny because you talk to like the receptionist of the hotel, and she says something like, Vector has booked a room for you. Actually, no, it's Vector employee Alan whatever. He paid from his own pocket to get her this like really great room in the hotel or whatever because he likes her a lot, right? So it's just building on that.
And everyone, is there a way to answer a phone call in private? Or does it have to be like public video chat anyone can hear? Is that just how it has to be?
I don't know. In this game, it's visualized in that way.
It is because and then everyone next to him can see it. It's not just the visual presentation. It's legit. It's like everyone can hear and they're all always making fun of him. Like, oh, you like Shion, don't you? And he's always like, shut up, shut up. She can hear you, shut up. So
I mean, Miyuki does that. And I forget the name of the other guy who's
the other
like,
employee.
The other guy who works under him.
Yeah.
Don't go get any ideas just because you're alone with the chief or whatever. Like, oh, what? What are you talking about? Shut up, man. Like, it's good. It's good comedy, good moments.
I love when he finally works up the courage to ask her out, and she's like, sure. And he goes, yeah, I thought you'd say that. It's okay. Maybe some other time. Wait, sure? What? Oh, okay. I'll pick up at 7. Right?
Yeah.
So good. I love
really, really good. But they're going to go together to see this demonstration. There's a demonstration set up for 2 new weapons that Vector is developing.
And that's Omega and T-elos.
Omega and T-elos.
Or is it T-elos?
It's T-elos.
Okay, but
yes.
Xenogears.
Yes.
This is an old thing from Xenogears. I wonder how relevant this is to what it was when it was mentioned in Xenogears.
Well, T-elos was also brought up in Xenosaga 1.
Yeah.
On the Woglinde, actually. It's kind of at the beginning of the game.
Well,
there's a certain room.
It was in Xenogears, though, right? Where you learn about the extrons and entrons, and then there's a part where there's little T-elos, and it's like, confidential. Yeah,
I think so.
Okay.
But I think if it's not on the Woglinde, it's in some facility in Xenosaga 1 where there's a certain room you go into and you read about T-elos.
Yeah.
So it was already in development even back a year before this.
It would seem, based on what it is / looks like, that it was in development right alongside KOS-MOS the whole time.
Yeah.
As a twin project, that they almost have a link to each other.
Sure. So anyway, they're going to show it off for the first time in a little battle here. They have captured a whole bunch of Gnosis, which they release in this little contained battle room, and T-elos just messes them all
almost
up,
like immediately, just like you just see them all explode, basically, like all around him. There's really cool cinematography in these cutscenes. The camera works wonderful, but you see this like long lens camera kind of rotating around T-elos, as she is just like massacring everything around her with almost no effort being expended.
Yes. The point of this is to show, once again, Telos is much more powerful than KOS-MOS.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, we've had Doctus be stronger than KOS-MOS now.
Yeah.
Now we're having Telos be much stronger.
Slowly, it's Agent Smith. It's in the Matrix 2, Matrix Reloaded.
Yeah.
When it's like, oh, Neo's better than all the agents. Like, what can they do now? Oh, they got upgraded. Okay, now Neo's not as good a fighter all of a sudden. Yeah. They've got to do something like that for each game, for each movie.
So that's the first demonstration is Telos. And the second one is going to be Omega. But Vector has chosen KOS-MOS to be the opponent of Omega in that demonstration.
Yeah.
And so Abel is the pilot of the Omega mech.
Remember Abel's arc?
Yes.
Is Omega Abel's arc?
No, I don't think so. The Omega is the remains or what they got from the Ormos Proto Omega weapon from Xenosaga Episode II. Remember that giant freaking like planet destroying angelic mech thing that came out? But there was that one smaller, still huge, but smaller mech that Sergius went into that then, I guess, connected with the larger Proto Omega that he piloted.
That's so funny because you sit in the mech to make the mech as a bigger version of you, but then you in the mech sits in the, the other mech thing, and it's like this. It's a nested. It's almost like a fractal. Like the more you zoom in, the more you just see.
Yes,
I kind of felt that way too.
Yes. Okay. So essentially, that smaller mech that Sergius was in was somehow like salvaged. And now Vector has it. And this is something Margulis is upset about in talking with Heimline, the current sort of like leader of Ormos that he's shown speaking to numerous times. Oh no, they have the Omega. And Heinlein mentions it is where it belongs or something like that. And he's like, are you suggesting that the Omega belongs to the Federation? This is all building Margulis's doubt around Heinlein, who doesn't seem to care about all of the traditions and of Ormus.
The Rennes-le-Château is like, what? They came and did a thing. He's like, oh, we already got the thing. It's fine. It's like, you removed the saint from the place? Like, what? Why did you do that? Like, she's been here for presumably 4,000 years or however long.
Yeah.
And like, oh, we're just doing some stuff. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And he's really seems to be taking issue with it, but he's quite obedient at the moment.
Yes.
When they tell him what to do.
He's obedient, but he's clearly doubting and having problems. Absolutely. And we'll talk about that later. But anyway, that's where this Omega came from, was from the Proto Omega. Now Vector has it. Now the Federation has it. They're going to use it in their war against the Gnosis. Also, what's important to note here is that Abel is piloting the Omega.
Yes.
But also, it's a little bit like, I think this is true in Evangelion as well. There's a there's a certain mental or like a neural link between the pilot and the mech in order to like operate at full efficiency.
At the quickest like reflexes and
you have to like be neurally linked with the tech itself.
Right.
And so they are doing these tests to try to get a 100% efficient link between Abel and the Omega. And this is a failure in this test. At a certain point, it starts losing control. They have to shut the Omega down and eject the pilot.
Well, it almost starts attacking the observers, right?
Yes.
And almost wrecks the whole thing.
Right.
I wonder, like, if Shion was in danger, would KOS-MOS all of a sudden be able to beat Omega?
Sure.
I don't know.
Well, I'm not even sure that the people who have made KOS-MOS know what that link is all about.
Exactly.
That seems to be something kind of beyond what they understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just in case, we've got Xenosaga fans here who have not played Xenogears for some reason.
Oh dear, what are they missing
there
out
are
on?
going to be some Xenogears spoilers here for the next 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
Maybe even less than that, but skip ahead a little bit. I'll try to put a time code on the screen to be more helpful on that end. But yes, Abel from Xenogears, who is reincarnated in the episode 5 story of Xenogears as Fei Fong Wong.
Yeah.
Is exactly this kid. Basically 100%. Straight up. It looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
What I wonder is whether or not in Xenosaga episode 4 or 5 or whatever. I guess Shion's story was supposed to be episodes 1 and 2. that ended up being 3 games, but it was supposed to be 2.
Right.
Then you have a 3 and 4, which is a different arc, and a 5 and 6, which is a different arc. That was supposed to be the original Xenosaga.
Right.
I wonder if Abel and the sort of Xenogears story would have been reworked into like one of those 3 arcs or something like that. End of Xenogears spoilers. What I found interesting in light of all that spoiler stuff we just talked about is that I was not expecting Abel here to be more or less autistic. The child is basically has a condition that is like autism.
He seems nonverbal,
yet
incredibly bright.
He does say some words to Shion later, but it's very few.
Okay.
And he doesn't talk often.
Yeah, he doesn't talk much. He seems to be very focused on specific tasks, right? And very mysterious, very mysterious.
Yes. And that was not, I guess, what I pictured based on what I thought Abel would be. But I do think it is actually quite interesting. I think for reasons that I might get into more detail on in a different episode.
Okay.
But because at first I was like, oh man, like I didn't think that was how Abel was supposed to be or whatever. But I was like, wait a minute, this might actually be really cool. Like the more I thought about it. But yeah, Yuli Mizrahi is sort of like overseeing the Omega project here, and in particular, she is supposed to be working with Abel to help with communication between him and so that's kind of her job. So she's kind of watching.
He's really good at communicating with a mech, but maybe less good at communicating with other people.
Yeah, whatever neural connection they're using to connect him into that mech. Yeah.
But this is important. He basically shows up, doesn't say anything, draws a picture on the ground and leaves. And the picture that he draws is, I can't remember what it was. Hold on. I can't remember what he drew.
He drew Nephilim.
That's right. He drew Nephilim. Yes. Yeah. And then leaves, basically knowing that Shion would recognize
that picture.
And then he goes. And we have seen Nephilim at this point, I think, at least once.
Yes, in this game.
Shion has
been having flashes. And she's been having those how did you call it? Like those red waves of Udu sort of like erupting, and she'll like, I don't know if she's blacked out just yet, but it's about to happen for the first time. But she keeps having these episodes where Udu contacts her and she blacks out, basically. Right. But yeah, I think we have seen Nephilim appeared, I think, on the island. Back on Paideia Island or whatever. Yeah. So anyway, so that's everything with Abel and Yuli Mizrahi and everything like that. Shion leaves, and she goes and makes contact with Doctus and Scientia, and gives them some updated information about what's going on there. Miyuki's kind of part of that call. That's where she faints for the first time, is during that call, because Alan calls in, and then she's like away she's like already blacked out.
That's right.
So Alan rushes over, and it's like, oh, you're going to be busy for our plans. Like, don't worry about it. And she's like, no, let's go out like right now.
Yeah.
So they end up going out then and getting some dinner. And she commits the unforgivable sin of a first date, which is to bring up your ex.
Of course.
On the first date.
Yeah.
Which makes Alan very sad. But anyways, they go on in this, nice date, and they have a good time. But I kind of forgot, this might not have been the first time actually. I think she actually fainted before this when she met with Chaos, because Chaos had called in, I think, before the demonstrations. And she had received that call and went and met him in the cafe, and she fainted there in the cafe talking to him.
Yeah, she did.
And then was brought back to her. Oh, and then, we saw Chaos talking with Nephilim on some like high rise somewhere in the city.
Do
you have notes on that?
I do, but I'd have to find them for a minute. Trying to protect someone does not always lead to happiness, right? Isn't this where they're talking and that's the line there?
They are essentially doubting whether or not revealing the truth to Shion is like really something that would be good for her. This goes all the way back to the first game, though. I mean, Nephilim right from the beginning is saying, like, you're going to have to face some really painful stuff here.
Yeah, I don't know
and
if you're
she essentially, at the end of the Encephalon dive sequence, where she started to try to explain some of this, Nephilim, that is, came to the conclusion, you guys are not ready to face your past yet. Now, Junior kind of has. Junior in episode 2 kind of like did what he needed to do. faced Albedo and faced his past and took responsibility for what he did and all that. But Shion still hasn't. So that's kind of what this game is for.
And we haven't mentioned this yet, but 1 year has passed since Xenosaga Episode 2. And so there is 1 year in anime is like 6 years. So it's like quite a lot of time to reflect.
I thought it was hilarious how Shion would bring up, like when she was listening to the guys, Alan and the guy teasing him about liking her. And she's like, oh, it's just so funny. No one has changed it at all in 6 months. And I'm going, 6 months? How much do you expect somebody changes in 6 fetching months?
I know, seriously.
6 months is nothing.
In an anime, it's like,
what are you talking about?
3 years.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's hilarious. By the way, I didn't bring this up before, but about 2 hours into the game is where you get like the text crawl prologue. Basically, where Shion is kind of explaining what happened and all this stuff. And here's the what would you call it? The kind of information you need to know from the previous game to this one. And you see her ship kind of in outer space as it crossfades between different shots, and you're just reading a ton of text. I mean, she's speaking it out loud, but it's just a ton of text, kind of like the beginning crawl of a Star Wars movie.
Right.
And it's just happening really late in the game, which is fascinating to me that it happened that late. And then now all of a sudden we're going to slow down. I do like the intro of the game, but you know when the intro's over when that happens. And it felt kind of funny when that happens so late in the game. Right?
I mean, it's at least maybe like an hour or an hour and a half
it took a
into
while.
the game. But yeah, it leads right into the title reveal. Like the Xenosaga III title reveal.
You don't even see the title of the game.
Happens after that.
Yeah.
Little explanation monologue from Shion about all the stuff that happened in Missing Year and whatnot.
Just interesting. Xenosaga 2 did something similar, not quite to this extent though. This was pretty heavy. And also this sets the tone for, they got a pretty exciting beginning setup of the game here. And then from that point on is where the pace kind of starts to slow down a bit, right? For the next few hours of gameplay. I'm not even saying I didn't like it, but it's strange to have an intro like that. You know,
it's a very, very long intro. It's an intro that incorporates, let's see, Kevin and Mother, Testaments, infiltration of the UMN Vector thing.
Yeah, Missing Year.
Paideia Island.
Yeah,
I think we even get the Margulis attack scene in Rennes-le-Château. So we get Margulis on Mictum, like the destroyed Mictum with Pellegrini talking about stuff like that, and then realizing, oh crap, Jin's about to go to freaking Rennes-le-Château, can't let that happen. Then the attack at Rennes-le-Château and the Elsa being lost.
Yeah, that's right.
There's like 7 scenes.
Yeah, it's quite a bit
that lead up to the end of the intro.
Yeah, it's almost a game in and of itself. Or that story could have been a game in itself.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff.
That's fun stuff. And then one other thing that we've kind of have passed over up to this point that I didn't bring up was that Guignan, Negredo, he like gets contacted by Udo. And my understanding was that he was not supposed to be able to make contact with Udo. Is that correct or incorrect?
That is correct.
Okay.
So I'm confused by this, and I've even finished the game. So it's possible that there is a like database entry for this that explains it that I just haven't read because the database is freaking enormous. But Guignan calls Junior on the Durandal in the first scene in which we're reintroduced to Junior again.
Okay.
And talks to him. Guignan is talking to him as Guignan.
Right, not as...
But then in a scene shortly after that, it cuts back to Dmitry Yuriev in control. So this, here's what I think it is. I am waiting for, you guys will hopefully explain it, but this is what I have pieced together based on just the context I have. Yuriev can somehow control Guignan to look like Guignan when he needs him to like encourage Junior to do something.
Okay.
But it's not really Guignan. It's Yuriev posing as Guignan. Is that what I'm seeing there? And then he goes back to being Yuriev, and because it cuts to that scene where Guignan is basically being contacted by Udo. He yells a bunch first about like, no, shut up, stop talking to me. I don't want to do what you want. I think he's talking to Yuriev at that point. He's resisting Yuriev controlling him. He does not want him to to use his body to hurt Junior or whatever. So I think that's what he's all upset about. But then Udo, he says, right? So he comes in contact with Udo.
Was that Yuriev who contacted Udo, or came in contact, or Guinan?
Well, I know that Yuriev came in contact with Udo 100 years ago, Piper time. Okay, he was one of the first contacts, even before Voyager was.
Right, yeah.
And so I know he has had contact, so maybe that's it. But I think Udo waves are somewhere in Yuriev's mind, or he has some sort of collective unconscious contact with it.
Of course.
And he has shoved Guinan back in there. So Guinan's back in there in the unconscious somewhere and comes in contact with Udo that way. And was not expecting it because like they've said in the past, he's not supposed to be affected by Udo waves at all.
Right.
So that was an interesting thing.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
If you guys are
there's a lot of
confirming that I'm right about this, because I was so fetching confused by this. In one scene, it's Guinan not warning Junior at all. Oh, I'm being controlled by Yuriev. Don't listen to me if I try to tell you to do something. Yeah. It's just Guinan talking to him. Hey, I can't join you. I've got business on 5th Jerusalem or whatever. My assumption is that's Yuriev appearing to Junior as Guinan.
Okay.
But being Yuriev.
Okay.
That's my assumption there. Am I right? If they confirmed I'm right on this or not?
You'll have to highlight all the spoiler points, but I believe.
Yes, he can. Yuriev is switching back and forth between the two, so yes, this is it. So okay, I'm correct on that. All right. Good. So Yuriev is manipulating Junior by appearing and speaking as if he's Guinan. But really, it's just Yuriev. And so after that scene where he's yelling at him, I'm sorry, I should be more specific. Guinan, in the unconscious, when he's contacted by Udo, he's yelling, saying, don't talk to me, don't, go away. He's yelling at Yuriev. And then we go to the scene in Yuriev where I think it's Citrine comes up to him and says, hey, is everything all right? And he says, oh, I'm just having trouble getting along with my son. And so that's what he's referencing.
I do remember that.
So that's what's going on there.
Okay, perfect. Another note here is that T-elos has the 3-circle motif, kind of like all over. That's like her main motif. Right?
Yes. And again, that is a tool of Vector and Wilhelm.
I should also bring up just the name T-elos. A lot of people may not know what that word even means. Cosmos, of course, is pretty clear. But T-elos is maybe a little less clear. T-elos has something to do with like a goal or a reason or a purpose. Something like a teleology would be like the idea of or the study of like the reason, the cause or the purpose for something existing, right? So T-elos as a counterpart to Cosmos, I'm trying to determine what exactly that means. And the fact that T-elos is stronger is interesting. But if we're going to bring this back to Nietzsche a little bit, you could say that Cosmos is the material and T-elos is the meaning, which trumps all the material. Like the material doesn't actually matter if there isn't meaning. When meaning shows up, it can override all of your material. Right. The meaning, the T-elos shows up and it gives the material purpose. And I don't know if I'm giving an early read. I usually try not to do this much with symbolism. You don't want to read it too early because I could be totally off on that. But just the words, someone named Cosmos and someone named T-elos and them being sort of twins, but one has the upper hand. I would draw something like that out of it.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at.
Right.
With the two of them.
So from here, I think we should move into the fact that Roth Mantel comes in and basically comes in and tells Alan and his group, you guys, your division is being closed. The Cosmos project is over. She's being scrapped in favor of Telos. And then, Alan is confused about how he's going to tell Shion about this. But Yuli had a conversation with Canaan where they essentially talk about the fact that the only way to get through that, pocket of hyperspace that the Elsa fell into and got trapped in during the fight with Margulis, the only way to break through that is with the weapons that Omega has. So Canaan says to her, can't we just use Omega to do it? And she's like, there's no way
that means
they're going to let me do that. Well, the only other option then is Cosmos's special cannon that she was equipped with.
Yeah.
Well, that project has been scrapped.
Oh no.
So we're going to have to infiltrate and save KOS-MOS in order to open this little pocket of hyperspace that's about to start shrinking.
Yes.
Or constricting.
They say shrinking to Planck scale, right?
Yeah.
Like it is about to just disappear with everything in it. And then
so we
goodbye.
have a little bit of a ticking clock here. We need to hurry if we want to save those guys. The captain and the two, well, I guess they have more than two crew now on the Elsa. They have the professor or scientist guy.
That guy.
And his assistant. They're all stuck there. So
right.
Yuli comes to Alan and says, hey, I want to ask you for help about this, how we need to get Shion on board. Shion contacts Miyuki, and they set up a little operation here, a little mission where they're going to go in to the facility we were just at, where they did these demonstrations.
Yeah, the tests.
We're going to go there at night. So you get kind of the whole facility again at nighttime. And we're going to go rescue KOS-MOS from being scrapped. So there's a whole dungeon where you kind of go through and do that, rescue her, get her out, and then they sort of all take off from 5th Jerusalem out to where the Elsa's at, and KOS-MOS opens it. They go through. Rennes-le-Château is there, and then there's some dungeons where they kind of like land like underneath the landmass, kind of like in some caves.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Some pretty cool dungeon designs. I really liked it, actually. And you work your way up basically to that scene from the Red Testaments earlier with the coffin that was opened.
Yeah, ajar.
And the cross that's there. And importantly, there are 12 little grave sites, each one named after a tribe of Israel.
That's right, yep.
Which is the names of all the ES mech units in this game.
Yes, exactly.
Well, in fact, it's not even necessarily the mechs. It's more the vessels of anima that are powering the mechs.
Yeah.
And so you fight Virgil there, and this is where we see the vessel of anima removed from his ES, and he says something like, "This is just the kind of place this is," right? Like their ES units are like kind of like get powered down or whatever. So they're in a special place where the vessels of anima and the ES units are affected by this holy land or whatever. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the vessels of anima themselves. They are designed as almost like a brain and human spine, right? So it's like a unit thing at the top that's kind of like the head, and then it's basically like a human spine.
Okay.
That comes down. That is like the form of the vessels of anima. And I'm still kind of researching this. I didn't have as much time as I wanted to like fully work through this. But one symbol that I thought could be relevant is the symbol of the demiurge itself. So the demiurge is essentially a lion's head with like a serpent's body.
Ooh, yes, very
and
good.
The way that
very
you
good.
See that is like in a profile, it's like the lion's head, and it almost looks like the serpent is like a spine or a spinal system of cords
I like that.
are sort of connected to it. I wondered if that symbol went into how these vessels of anima were designed, if that's why they were chosen that way. I've seen some places where they show that comparison. They show like a human skull and brain with like the spine, and they juxtapose that against the demiurge symbol. But I'm not sure in, Jewish mysticism or in Gnosticism how those symbols are compared, or even if they are.
If they're relevant, I don't think I can add to that.
I'm still kind of looking into that, but I'm curious as to why that form was chosen for the vessels of anima. Having beaten the game, I know what the vessels of anima are,
right?
Where they come from, where that power comes from. We're not talking about that till the final episode.
Okay.
So I know that, but I'm just curious as to why that specific form is chosen symbolically for them. Not sure I have a complete answer to that yet, but it's something that's on my mind as we continue moving through this.
Nice.
But yeah, they're named each after one of the tribes of Israel. So this is where you have the battle against T-elos. So Roth Mantel shows up, and T-elos and KOS-MOS have a big battle. KOS-MOS is not up to the task. It's clear that T-elos is more powerful.
Yes. And T-elos, some of the interesting differences between T-elos and KOS-MOS is that T-elos has a personality, right? And along with her name, T-elos, T-elos has a T-elos for being. T-elos has a reason. T-elos understands like a purpose, whereas KOS-MOS maybe doesn't. KOS-MOS is more robotic, more, at least the way that she acts and interacts with people is a lot more like I just do what I'm told. Whereas T-elos is a lot more like, oh, I know, I get the whole point of things and I see beyond what's going on here. And I have, because of that, she's developed something of a personality, right? A way to interact with the world in a way that KOS-MOS hasn't quite yet, which is, I just find fascinating. But when T-elos finally destroys KOS-MOS, because she does, there's something like a merger that happens where T-elos is like, okay, now that I've weakened you, I'm bringing you in. I need your body.
Incorporating.
Basically, yes. We are going to join together.
Merge.
And that is, I don't understand yet the motive for T-elos. I don't know why. I don't understand exactly. The way that I want to think is like, this is a good thing, right? Like the merger is a good thing. It's going to result in a more complete being. And that, these are two halves of a being that really ought to just be one being in the first place. But I don't want T-elos in charge. I want KOS-MOS or whatever personality might be latent beneath KOS-MOS. I want that to be in charge because I've got a relationship with KOS-MOS that I don't have with T-elos. I don't understand. T-elos is a bit of a wild card, right? So if they merge and get this new power and T-elos is in charge, like, I don't know where that goes, right? But I sense that something like that is happening here. And that, of course, there's the, those ideas are being explored here.
I just had a thought. I mean, the vessels of anima being like a brain and spinal cord, or just a spine, could be really something as simple as in the human body, your central nervous system all works through that structure.
And it's the subconscious.
That's how you move. That's how you do anything you do, right? I mean, it all comes through that sort of structure. So and that could just be the same structure, but for the mech bodies.
Okay.
And that's just the form that it's how they operate. They can only operate when this thing is inside of them. It needs a brain and a central nervous system to move around. Right. That could be like one element of like how they operate. And so when it's taken out, it's like the mech just stops working.
Right.
But at the same time, I do feel like there's another sort of deeper symbolic meaning to it that might have something to do with the demiurge, but I'm not sure yet.
Okay, good. Anyway. We've talked before in, I think, Pied Piper, or A Missing Year, actually. No, this must have been A Missing Year with Le Megaton. Yeah, this was A Missing Year. About how the Gnosis were being controlled by a person, right? Yes. And how that was funny.
Some of them, not all of them.
Exactly. Yeah. In this game, they kind of undo that. They say, well, there's a lot of Gnosis were controlled by this Le Megaton dude, but like, basically, all of them now are not, right? Like that's not a thing, right? The Gnosis are being controlled by something we don't understand, and the person that could control them is not relevant anymore. Yeah. So they kind of dispel that, because I remember that was a thing that kind of made me feel a bit funny in Missing Year about how that all went down.
Yeah.
And then when Nephilim is speaking to Chaos, there is that line there that trying to protect someone does not always lead to happiness.
Yep.
And this is an important one. Nephilim says that only Shion knows KOS-MOS's heart.
Yes.
Something about that, right? Yes. That you're the only one that can help KOS-MOS find her heart, basically. That her heart is somewhere down there, and you're the one that's going to do that. And that's kind of the whole purpose, because KOS-MOS is the only one that can save them. And Shion is the only one that can, like, get to KOS-MOS.
Right.
And so that's the importance here, and why I would really rather not T-elos just destroy her and then take her over.
Right. The culmination of this scene is like KOS-MOS is basically about to be destroyed by T-elos because he keeps refusing to merge and whatnot. But the pendant we saw from the opening scene that Kevin got from his mother, then Kevin gave to Shion. It activates, and then they find themselves transported to some other time and place.
So the legends were true.
I'm
sure there was a legend that went along with that.
Yeah, which will be where we pick up next time.
It will.
Before we end, I'm sure you got some more notes.
I do, because this ties into Thus Spake Zarathustra.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, this one's fascinating because in that discussion between Nephilim and Chaos says he's struggling between the idea of fate and the idea of an open future.
Yes.
He says that there's this big part of him that just wants to go along with fate and not see the potential ways that the future can be different. And then Nephilim kind of explains, oh, but an open future is what we're all fighting for, something like that. And that is more or less what the game, that's a big central theme of the game right here, is chaos and Nephilim and the good guys deciding that they want an open future where they can determine it for themselves. And then the bad guys who believe in this deterministic, no free will, fate-controlled future that cannot be altered or changed. Right. Which is also, I think, why Wilhelm is so, like, it's no big deal that they did that. It's kind of cute. I think it's kind of funny that they're trying so hard, you know. He has as part of his belief system that you can't change what's going to happen. And he is 99.9% sure of what's going to happen. And despite these little cute people making, you know, adjustments here and there, he's like, you can't change fate. Like, who are you fighting against? Like, what's going to happen has been foreordained since the beginning of time, and it will unfold as it can. And there's only one way that all of these things happen. There's not there's no option for multiple futures, right? So, like, what are you even doing? What are you fighting for?
Right.
And then the good guys are like, no, we can change the future and change fate and break out of the Ouroboros and you know, get out of this self-contained, sufficient cycle and break out into newer possibilities.
Right.
So that sets up the dichotomy, which is not exactly Nietzschean, but it's similar to some of the stuff that Nietzsche was struggling, especially around the time he wrote Thus Spake Zarathustra.
Right.
With eternal recurrence and how, but that sucks. But it's true, but it sucks.
It's true, but and you got to use the will to power to accept it.
Yes,
which Wilhelm seems to have accepted.
Yes, absolutely.
And the testaments seem to have accepted.
But the good guys are like, screw
that. not the party. They are against it.
Yeah. Okay. That's probably
it.
Oh, and then there's a company called the Hyam Company, which is
Hyams,
just another great. There's a lot of Xenogears references being thrown out here in Episode 3, and I'm loving it. And I feel like it's a greater volume of references directly to Xenogears.
I guess what we should also mention real quickly is that Udu, in contacting Shion, in those scenes where he contacts her, it's like he's, well, first of all, you might miss it, but like right in the center of the screen towards the end of that, you kind of see the outline of Abel. Like where in the red Udu waves. Oh. So like it's like the red Udu waves are sort of like all in the screen, right? And then you have Shion's little character portrait comes up when she talks back to him. But like right in the center of the screen, the Udu waves sort of move around the form of Abel.
Okay, I don't know that I really noticed
he kind of mentions the fact that he's trying to understand this universe. Udu is making an attempt. So he's like, Shion, a word that like designates a person, you know,
I love this.
And all
Teach
this stuff.
Teach me about love. Teach me about human beings.
Udu is making an attempt
to
understand this dimension it's in.
Yeah.
Like, hold on, let me use I'll use the word contacts.
Yeah.
To be able to observe and understand the universe around it or the universe that it's in and in turn itself. You must understand what's around you to understand yourself. It's also an Alan Watts thing.
You do not exist separate from your environment.
Yes.
You're influenced by it and you influence it and you're all connected.
The environment must needs exist for you to even... This is why like time... The concept of time is meaningless without things to measure.
Yes, it's all relative.
So unless you have a thing and another thing, at least two things that have some kind of relation to each other, I can measure the distance between those things and how much time it takes. So things are meaningless without
reference to other things.
Things.
Totally.
So the individual needs an environment and other individuals in order to start making sense. In order for reality to have any meaning whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is what Udu's trying to do through certain contacts. The fact that Abel is there, I think, is a key clue as to that. And the fact that he's talking with Shion here, the fact that he has tried to make contact. And, you know, we talked about this in Xenogears quite a bit. But the nature of how that contact goes depends on the heart of the person making contact. So you'll have a certain character, even in Xenogears, but certainly in Pied Piper, Yuriev and Voyager made contact with Udu.
Yeah.
Those were disastrous exchanges that led to the two of them developing terror, absolute terror about some event that was coming, and they resisted Udu. They hated it and wanted to fight against it. Shion is making contact with Udu and having no such disastrous visions of some catastrophe.
Right.
It's just a pleasant conversation with some being that she can't quite understand, but she's making her best attempt. And so, the state of mind in Xenogears, it had more to do with the psychological state. How broken psychologically versus whole are you psychologically when you make contact?
Right.
Will determine the result of that contact. Are you a complete or incomplete contact is what we called it in Xenogears.
Right.
And it seems to me that Shion she's not complete at this point, but she's at least not having these horrific, terrifying experiences in her contact with Udu, at least not in these initial ones. And so I think that's key to understand. Voyager and Yuriev had very different experiences in their contact with Udu. So anyway, I think Udu is trying to find contacts, complete contacts, not ones that will result in the people going completely insane and becoming these major villains in the universe, but complete contacts in order for it to understand this dimension it finds itself in.
So this brings up another thing, that you're right that Abel can talk, because I took a note about something Abel says. Abel says that Shion is a sad being.
Yes.
And Nephilim said that a sad being was atoning and so was leading the universe into destruction. Right? That now I don't know if it is Shion necessarily or if it's somebody else. Everyone, there's a lot of people. There's Jean. There's a lot of people in this game that are like trying to make atonement for wrongs that have happened in the past.
It's not, I don't think it's a spoiler to say yes, it is.
Okay.
But it would be a spoiler to say why.
Okay,
so
fair enough,
we'll find out why later.
Okay.
But yes, they are talking about Shion in that scene between Nephilim and Chaos, and the sad being is supposed to be connected between those two events.
Would you call Shion a sad being just in general?
You know,
Abel and
this is something that I think we will have a much longer conversation about.
Let's put a bookmark in this one.
At the end of the game, because spoiler alert from my thoughts on the ending. I do not like Shion at the end of this game.
I've heard that. I have heard tell in the comments that.
Now, that being
so
said, I have seen certain people's interpretations or the way in which they view Shion as a character that they resonate with her.
Okay.
And they feel like they understand her. So I have a feeling we're going to have a much longer conversation about Shion.
We might need to bring on a Shion stan for the last episode.
The whole point of saying this is to say that I think Shion's character, as to like understanding the psychology of Shion, is not shown to a sufficient degree for me to come to the conclusion Shion is a sad being, the way that you're asking right now.
Yes.
I think you would ask that question because...
Well, that's what they refer to her as.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, yes, there are ways in which she's sad, but also they're seeing something I'm not.
Yes.
Nephilim, Chaos, and Abel all see her in a way that I am not seeing her at all.
Yes.
And that makes me wonder, what are they seeing in her that is causing them to reflect and to label her as a sad being?
I would say absolutely think about this and make it a core part of the lens through which you try to analyze Shion as a character through big events that you're about to see.
Okay.
But yes, I think a lot of people, the way that they connect with Shion is they talk about their own personal fight with depression, right? And they say they can relate to Shion in this respect. It just has seen, I think the misstep here is not that there isn't sufficient psychological grounds from which we can view Shion in this way. It's that it's not shown to a sufficient degree up to this point
in order to
where I can justify Shion's actions in a very certain key scene. to where she comes across to a large portion of the audience as being absolutely cruel and just a total disgusting jerk in this scene.
Okay.
However, I'm saying this to those of you who are worried all of a sudden that somehow I'm going to miss this. I'm not concluded on the character analysis yet because, like I said, my first playthrough was just a let's go on a ride. I'll do the analysis in the second run. I'll take my notes in the second run. But even then, I put a pin in this for a reason because I knew that this was a contentious point.
Okay.
So we're going to try to look at Shion and try to really dig into those psychological grounds that will build a foundation for why she acts the way she does in this scene that's coming up. And so I want this to be something we all think about and discuss throughout the series. Why is Shion the sad being?
Okay.
And why does that give validity? Maybe not straight justification, but validity, or at least a sense of understanding as to why she would do what she does,
what she's about
near
to do.
the end.
All right. Oh, that's just wonderful.
Is that fair enough, everybody? Does that give you some peace of mind that I'm not totally missing the point on Shion here? I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, is all I'm saying.
Well, KOS-MOS is the 13th.
Yes.
So that's fun. I don't know what it means yet. But she's the 13th. And I look forward to exploring.
Well, there's the 12, emulators,
Israel, the Animus,
the 12 emulators, and then the 13th would be the original Zohar. Gotcha. We talked a little bit about the 13th door and the story from the Grimm's fairy tales.
The Marian
King story. Yeah,
it's the children of Mary. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for this episode. We look forward to talking to you next time, and have a wonderful week. Peace out, everybody.